It's Talkin Trash with Will Nash. Thank you so much for being here and joining us today. I am super excited to welcome back to the podcast Zoe Bystrov of Youth for Lake Simcoe. Zoe, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me back, Will Nash. It's an honor again.
Oh, it's an honor to have you here on the podcast. The last time you were here, we learned so much from you on what you can do just when you're out there in your own world and trying to create a better space, a better world to live in. And it's more about that today. You're here, of course, with Youth for Lake Simcoe.
Yes.
You started this up. You founded it yourself. For those who are listening or watching right now who may not be familiar with your organization, tell us a little bit about how that started and what it's all about.
Yeah, so Youth for Lake Simcoe is pretty much a group which originated just because of a love for the lake. So it all started back in like 2020 when there was a lot of talk about, environmental conservation related to the oceans and protecting marine life. And me and my friends, we noticed something similar happening on Lake Simcoe. And it's really just broke our heart because Lake Simcoe is such a beautiful part of our community. And we really want just to protect it and preserve for future generations. So we started doing a lot of cleanups, we do school presentations, and we really just try to promote the importance and the beauty of Lake Simcoe and its watershed.
It's incredible the work that you and your group are doing
Thank
with
you.
that. Now, I have to ask, what age, if you don't mind me asking you this question, did you and your friends start to come together with Youth for Lake Simcoe?
Well, it was the 6th grade, so I guess I was around 12 years old.
I gotta be honest, at 12 years old, I wasn't making all the big change in the world that you're doing right now, especially locally in our community. So congratulations to you for doing so much and just putting so much passion into everything that you do.
Thank you.
Now, today we're gonna discuss the whole concept of microplastics and recycling.
Yes.
For those who may not be familiar with what exactly microplastics are, what are they?
Well, microplastics originally, fun fact, it comes from the Greek word plastikos, which means moldable, and it's pretty much a tool that people have been using for a long time to create various different sorts of things, plastic wrapping, plastic bottles, even like many parts of fabric include plastic and furniture, etc. They pretty much become an essential part in a lot of manufacturing facilities and a lot of part of our products. But I would say the biggest part of or the biggest concern related to plastic is the microplastics. And those really are small plastic debris which have been decomposing, and they're smaller than 5 millimeters in size, so they're super, 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 super tiny. And they're pretty much composed of these small molecules called polymers. And there is, unfortunately, a lot of concern related to microplastics because they have shown to have a lot of negative effects, not just on our human health, but also on the health of animals and the general ecosystem.
Okay, so let's start there. Let's start with wildlife. Let's start with animals.
Yeah.
How does it affect their world? How does it affect their habitat? Maybe people watching, people listening right now are not familiar with that either.
No, definitely. So, first of all, in the entire world that we live in, there's a lot of plastic which is produced every year. In fact, we produce more plastic which is equal to the weight of more than 900 Empire State Buildings.
Wow.
To give you a bit of perspective. So unfortunately, about 40% of these plastics are single use, and a lot of them, unless they're not like incinerated or burned down, they end up in landfills. And when they end up in landfills, they start decomposing into small microplastics. And because they are they're like very small units, they can travel throughout pretty much the environments. So to give you an example, any microplastic which is in Lake Simcoe could potentially travel all the way out into the Atlantic Ocean.
Which is crazy when you think about it that way. They can travel that far of a distance, and how many different species is it passing through?
Yeah, so there are about 700 species which actually mistake firstly microplastics as their food. And so unfortunately, a lot of them, they actually end up indigesting the microplastics. And it's kind of similar in the human situation because we, as people, we also ingest a lot of microplastics into our body. And there have been a lot of studies showing that microplastics are already present within our body and also more specifically in our brain.
So when you talk about humans and microplastics and how maybe we don't even know what we're ingesting, maybe we don't even realize we're putting it into our system, how bad is it? Like, can you give us an idea of that?
Well, if you can imagine how much microplastic we eat approximately each week, it's equal to 5 grams, which is the same as a credit card.
A week?
A week! So imagine pretty much eating 1 credit card every single week into your body.
Now, this might seem like a silly or a stupid question, but how exactly are we doing that?
Well,
how are we getting that amount of microplastics in our bodies?
Well, I think there are a lot of different ways which microplastics are actually able to enter into our bodies. The first one is through water, actually, and a lot of bottled water. So you may think that buying a plastic bottle is good for convenience, especially when you're on the go. But in reality, about 90% of the water bottles contain microplastic, and there were actually some studies that have shown a very high concentration of microplastics within the water, which is equal to 38,000 pieces in only 1 gallon of water.
So you know what I'm going to say to this? I'm going to do my part with this. And I just think that everyone should have their very own Talkin Trash with Will Nash reusable mug.
Oh,
and
yeah.
then you don't have that issue, right? Then that's
Exactly,
not a problem.
exactly.
So just slide into the DMs. We'll hook you up.
Exactly. No, I completely agree, and not just that, but also through the food that we eat. Unfortunately, a lot of fish who eat microplastic themselves, it goes into their system, and then when we eat it, we get the microplastic through ourselves. And even the water could not even just come from a plastic bottle; it can also just come from our general tap water from the watershed. There were a lot of studies done in 2020 about microplastics within Lake Simcoe, and they did a bunch of different tests, and they found that Lake Simcoe does. Fortunately, we do have less concentration of microplastics compared to the Great Lakes, so that's good on us. But there is still a pretty high concentration in the urban areas. And to give you a bit of an idea, out of the tests that they were doing, 72% of the microplastics were anthropogenic, and 64% of the study's sediments had microplastic inside them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, those numbers are huge. They are high. They are too
yeah.
high. So beyond, reusable drinking containers and reusable water bottles, which obviously very important to do in terms of microplastics, what are some other things that we as humans can be doing, not only for ourselves, but we touched upon the animals too and wildlife too, right? What can we do for ourselves to bring those numbers down and to help out those around us?
Well, I think that also kind of ties into you remember hearing of the reduce, reuse, recycle? Well, actually, in reality, there are 6 R's, not 3. And those R's are reduce, reuse, recycle, plus rethink, repair, and reuse. So if you have something which is made out of plastic, you can rethink how you use it. You can repair something potentially like a legging that has like a scratch in it, right? Or like a little cut. You could stitch it up and you can repair it and use it again. And refuse is to refuse those impulse buys of stuff that maybe you don't need. So you can always opt out instead of the plastic container, maybe for a glass container. Or maybe if you already have something which you don't really need, you don't necessarily have to buy it. You could reuse and kind of refuse to buy that stuff and reuse what you already have.
It's funny because all of these years I thought it was always 3 R's, and I really have a bone to pick with my grade 6 teacher about this one, because you're coming here today in 2025 and you're telling me that no, Will, it is 6 R's.
No, exactly, it is. And also, I also want to touch that there are also a lot of great developments happening within the microplastic area. There are a lot of initiatives, and there are also a lot of good developments related to plastic and also microplastics. So, for example, there are a couple of water cleaning technologies. One which is called the Mr. Trash Wheel in the Baltimore Harbor that has been doing a lot of the river cleaning. But we also locally have the Pixie drone in Lake Simcoe, which we're very fortunate to get in September of 2024, thanks to a collaboration of the City of Barrie with Pollution Probe. And so we're hopeful that then the Pollution Probe and the City of Barrie can do some great things in, helping reduce the microplastic in the Lake Simcoe with the Pixie drone. And there's also a lot of similar technologies called the Bee-Bot or the Hula One, which actually goes on land and removes microplastic and kind of separates it from the sand. Yeah, and
that's impressive.
It's really cool. And I also want to say that there's a lot of research being done into microplastics. So there are there are a couple of different types of green plastics. In reality, more than probably we can think. The first is the one which is commonly known as biodegradable.
Yeah.
And so that one, it is unfortunately produced with fossil fuels, which isn't that great for the environment. And they can decompose faster when they come into contact with light and oxygen, but they're not really recyclable in most cases, and they do end up in the landfills, and they become the microplastics and leave chemical residue. And so there's also the bioplastic, which is kind of similar, although it's composed of plant polymers like sugarcane, corn, wheat. And so that one can also decompose easily when heated, but a lot of facilities don't really have that process which they can implement yet. But my favorite, my most interesting part of this whole thing is that they have a new bioplastic which they're developing, which potentially in the future, us humans, we could eat plastic.
Oh.
Yeah, it's something really, it's really interesting. It's kind of out of the blue, but
Yeah.
I'm excited to see how that goes.
That's going to be interesting. And also, obviously, with Busch Systems talking about the importance of recycling.
Yes.
And, we talked about not the 3, but the 6
6
R's that we
yes.
now know, right? What about the whole concept of, and I know this sounds like something so simple to, I'm sure, someone like you, but what about the concept of, not littering in our natural environments, which, believe it or not, people are still doing this.
They are still doing it. I remember I went on this one cleanup with our group, and we went to this small little basketball court in the Holly Community Center area, or Peggy Hill Team Community Center area, and there was a garbage bin and a recycle bin right near the basketball court, but the people using it still opted to throw the bottle a couple meters away from it. And so we did a cleanup of that place, and in only about 10 minutes, we picked up like a huge bag of plastic bottles in just 10 minutes, which is kind of crazy to think how in such a small area there can be so much condensed garbage. And if you can relate to that to our natural environment, Lake Simcoe, it's a watershed. It's not just a lake. It has so many animals, it inhabits so many people around it. And so when you're polluting or you're leaving like a plastic bottle in a wooden area, for example, it's not just littering the wooden area, it's actually littering the watershed. Because at some point that bottle is gonna make its way through the watershed into Lake Simcoe, and it's gonna further decompose into microplastics and then go through that unfortunate cycle, which we already talked about, and lead to, unfortunately, many negative consequences on us, animals, and our general ecosystem.
Well, and it's interesting, right? Sometimes I would assume that if someone is, making that decision, because it is a conscious decision to not recycle when you have the ability to recycle, you're just, it's kind of a selfish moment, right? Where you're just thinking about yourself and your convenience at that point in time, and you're not thinking about the long withstanding side effects, right?
Yeah.
Now, is there certain plastic items that you feel should not be in the environment?
Yes, there are a whole bunch of plastic items which should definitely not be inside our environment under any circumstances. Plastic bottles, styrofoam is also another one in that category. Plastic wrappers, plastic bags, any other type of, household item which is related to plastic bowls, anything really composed of plastic should not be inside the environment because it is unfortunately going to decompose over those years, but it does not take a short time to decompose. Most plastics take around 400 to 1,000 years to degrade. And so when it stays inside that process and continues through for such a long time, it also, some plastics, not all, but some plastics start to release certain toxic chemicals into the environment around it. And there's actually a specific term related to this where the toxic substances that come from the plastic, which kind of spread into the water itself, they're called leachates. And so,
excuse me?
Leachates.
Do not say that fast. Or at least I'm not going to say it fast. I'll let you say that word through the rest of the podcast.
Yeah, and it's even more concerning if it actually spreads into our groundwater systems and into our soil. Because again, water and soil, they're not renewable resources. They are an essential part of our earth, and we need to protect and preserve it, because otherwise, what's going to happen after that? We drink from the water, we use the soil to grow food. All the trees, all the other plants, flowers, they all grow from the soil. So if the soil gets impacted and if the water gets impacted, you could see how that could potentially, bring even more unfortunate negative consequences on not just us, but just in general, the entire planet.
You know what's so impressive to me is as we sit here, we have another conversation, is I know that there is somebody, if not many people watching or listening to this right now, who are, probably a few years younger than yourself.
Yeah.
And they're so inspired by not only your knowledge and your information that you're sharing with us, but just they'll be like, I want to do what Zoe's doing. I want to make a difference. Because, when someone says that one person can't make a difference or a small group of people cannot make a difference in the environment, what do you say to that?
Well, you know what? I say anyone can make a great difference. I remember being at this one cafe, and there was this little girl, and she was, with her family. I'm gonna lie, it was actually a Starbucks. Not a little cafe, it was a Starbucks. But that little girl, she was with her family, and she took one of those like plastic Starbucks cups, and I saw her walk towards the garbage and recycling bin of the Starbucks, and she actually put it into that recycling bin. And she was only like 2 or 3 years old, and I was my heart filled with joy when I saw that, because it gives like a hope that, again, more people, they're passionate about doing this and they want to make that difference. So if anyone else feels potentially, watching this or listening to this, like wherever you are, that you can make a difference, you absolutely can. I always say to our group members, even if you have 10, 15 minutes, a small cleanup wherever you see garbage helps a lot. Promoting the importance of Lake Simcoe and to not litter is so important. It makes such a great difference. And doing your part with the 6 R's and choosing not to use plastic bottles and other similar items will contribute, even in a smaller way, will help contribute to making our environment healthier and cleaner. And those small contributions, they might seem small at first, but they really make up at some point into a very large contribution.
Listen, if that 3-year-old inside a coffee shop could recycle,
yes,
we all can do our part. We
Oh,
all
yeah.
can do our part. Zoe, thank you so much for everything that you do, and thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate you coming back.
Thank you so much, Will
Yeah.
Nash.
Zoe Bystrov of Youth for Lake Simcoe. She is all over X, Twitter, social media.
Oh,
She has her
yeah.
own website. And thank you for being here. It's Talkin Trash with Will Nash. We'll see you next time.